it's Aaron, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and the fact that he dropped out and where exactly the left will go from here. Now, I talked a little bit about this a couple of days ago with a good friend of mine named Zahn. I'll leave a link to their channel in the description box below. But basically, the whole premise behind the interview that I did with them was the idea that even though Bernie Sanders dropped out, nothing really changes for the left. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But first, I just want to talk about how there are a lot of people right now that are online that are very upset that Bernie dropped out, and they're calling him a traitor, and they're doing all of these things, and they're just really mad that he would endorse Joe Biden. And I hate to say this, but we already knew that was going to happen. We knew from the very beginning that if Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination, he was going to endorse Joe Biden, and we knew that because Bernie Sanders told us that he was going to do that. Now, whether or not that's a good or bad thing, I'll leave that up to you to decide. I don't really care which way you vote in this election because, as far as I'm concerned, voting, when it comes to electoral politics, doesn't really do a whole lot. It can help a little. It can change things around in the margins, and a lot of people are making the argument that it's the most important thing in the world. It's not. The most important thing that you could possibly be doing right now is organizing on the ground level and actually getting together with your neighbors, your friends, your family, your coworkers, and that sort of thing, so you can push for a general strike or a labor strike, or whatever it is. But as far as electoral politics goes, as far as voting for either Biden or Trump, that's inherently entirely up to you. And I'll leave that between you and God, or you and whatever deity or non-deity you believe or don't believe in. But as far as Bernie Sanders dropping out and endorsing Joe Biden, we already knew that part was going to happen. We already had that idea in our head for several months. We had to come to terms with that a long, long time ago. And the real thing that we have to remember is that it doesn't really fucking matter. What Bernie Sanders already did was way more important than any endorsement that he could be making right now. Bernie Sanders did something really amazing while he was running for president, and basically the entire time he's ever been in office. He worked towards getting people the power back for themselves and not just relying on the elites to save them. One of the main things that Bernie Sanders has always said is "not me, us." That was his campaign slogan this entire go-around. And he projected that the entire way. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about the personality. It wasn't about falling in lockstep behind a leader. It was about a political revolution. It was about Medicare for all, canceling student loan debt, a myriad of other topics that he wanted to push for. Basically, social democratic ideals, and those were what he wanted, not just a cult of personality, and that's fantastic. That's something that we really honestly needed. And whether or not he endorsed Joe Biden doesn't really matter at this point. You can be mad about it, you can be upset about it, you can completely disagree with him, and all of those feelings are completely justified. But the truth is that Bernie Sanders already did the work necessary to get us to the point where we could move on our own. Now, if Bernie Sanders had gotten in and he did become president, yeah, it would have made a lot of difference. It would have made a lot more people see socialist policies actually working in real life, socialist policies, and they would enjoy that. They would benefit from it, and they might actually get a few concessions that actually aided them in gaining back, I don't know, the means of production. Bernie Sanders threw around a lot of ideas about worker cooperative sectors and direct democracy and that sort of thing. He talked about it a little bit once in a while, and that was, enough that it would have got it at least in the political discourse. But regardless of that, it doesn't really matter, because Bernie Sanders being there or not being there still means that we have a long road ahead of us. Vote for whatever you want. Vote your conscience. Vote third party. That does not matter, because as far as I'm concerned, electoralism makes such a small amount of difference on the grand scheme of things, especially when we're talking about a president who only has a limited amount of power in contrast to the entire state structure that he would be working within. But outside of that, our movement doesn't change its goals from here. The ideas that we had before, the things that we were pushing for, Our goals are still there. We just won't have somebody in the Oval Office helping us fight for it. But that's okay. It doesn't make that big of a difference because in the end, we still have to fight every single day as workers, as individuals, to make sure that we get the things that we need, to make sure that we actually obtain the liberties and freedoms that are owed to us, to make sure that eventually we seize those means of production. There was never going to be a president that came in and did all of those things for us. And Bernie Sanders has said that at the very beginning. Now, while I was talking to Zahn, I brought up two different memes, and I thought that they were pretty prevalent because I think that memes are actually really quite underrated when it comes to agitprop or when it comes to pushing a narrative. And these two memes really express the way that I feel about this whole situation. The first meme has to do with him endorsing Joe Biden. It had a picture of Bernie Sanders talking to a person, and it said in the caption above Bernie Sanders, "I would never endorse a political candidate, and if I did, don't trust me, or don't believe me," whatever it was. And I really agree with that because it's not about endorsing a political candidate. It's never been about endorsing a political candidate. We already know that it doesn't matter who Bernie Sanders decided to endorse because at the end of the day, his endorsement really was for the people. It doesn't matter if he endorses Joe Biden and Joe Biden's a horrible person. Bernie Sanders was just an individual, but he was pushing the idea that we together as a group, as a unified force, can collectively bargain for our rights. That was what he was pushing for. Whether or not Bernie Sanders personally, on an individual level, wants to endorse some asshole, doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It was never about him. It was never about the person. It was about the ideas. It was about the policy. It was about the movement itself. And that's how we carry on from here. And the second meme that I've seen that was really quite moving, actually, and a lot of people, when they seen it, they, teared up a little bit. And it made them emotional. And it basically went something along the lines of, there was a person, a young lady, and Bernie Sanders talking inside of a room. It was a cartoon meme. And over top of the young lady, it said, "Bernie, you promised us that you were going to save the world, that you were going to come in and change all of the politics and make things better for us and give us a government for the many and not just for the very few." And the caption over Bernie Sanders said, "No, I didn't promise I was going to do any of those things. I promised that you would, and you will." And I think that really hits home. That's a really deep thing to say because he's right, or at least the meme version of him is right. Whoever wrote that meme was really brilliant because it's true. Bernie Sanders was never going to save anybody. We have to stop thinking that our heroes are going to come in and make things better. There are no heroes. Nobody is going to save you. You have to kill your heroes. And Bernie Sanders essentially killed himself politically, ideologically. As far as the movement goes, he took himself out of the picture and put himself back into a place where, he can do a little bit of good. Back in the US Senate, back into a place where he might be able to change a few small things in the periphery if he argues just enough to make some of the people that are there, the political wonks, actually follow along with him. That's been his strategy the whole time. But he was able to do something much more interesting and much more useful. He was able to energize a base that would go out there and fight on behalf of themselves and actually achieve the things that they wanted to achieve. The Bernie Sanders movement is the logical outcropping of the Occupy Wall Street movement and any other movement that led up to it. This is a tidal wave. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the next iteration of it is going to be massive. And hopefully it doesn't go down the same road of assuming that electoral politics and somehow subverting the system from the inside is a viable method of achieving a revolution. Because we can see now, for the second time in a row, 2016 and now 2020, that trying to subvert the political system from the inside, trying to change the Democratic Party and make it into a party for the people, a socialist party, is not useful. It's not something that we can do. We have to create a new party. And by party, I'm referring to the type of party that they referred to back during the time of Marx and Engels, when they weren't talking about a political party as in the Democrats and Republicans. They were talking about a large mass of people who believed the same sort of thing. And that thing has to be socialistic. That's what we need right now. We need on-the-ground activity, we need movements, we need strikes, we need protests, and we need to be building dual power structures. And from there, we can actually achieve a real revolution. At least that's the way I look at it. Like I said, now that Bernie Sanders has dropped out, and even if he endorsed Joe Biden, nothing has changed. We move forward. And that's what we've always had to do. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. My name is Zahn. By the way, a lot of people are being unsubscribed from my channel. I've been getting comments about this all week, so check if you're still subscribed. If you aren't, resubscribe. If you are, hit the little bell button and make sure that you get notifications every time I release a video. And thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.